Hello, and welcome to another World of UX podcast. This is your host, Darren Hood. Thanks for taking the time to join us on today, and a special welcome to all of you who are joining us for the first time. We are fresh back from the World Usability Conference in Graz, Austria. What a wonderful time we had there. And I said this there, I say it, I don't think I've ever said this on the show, but it is really wonderful to see people face to face, especially since, we're not that far removed from the pandemic, and most of the conferences prior to that the vast majority of us were attended in person. And so since the pandemic, I think I've only been to maybe 2 or 3 conferences in person. Everything else has been virtual. It's great to be able to spend time interacting with people. We're so used to dealing with each other as avatars, whether we see people on Twitter, whether we see people on LinkedIn, wherever we see people, we're used to seeing people in that little circle and not seeing people of a truth from a completely realistic perspective, seeing them face to face. And I really loved the opportunity, not just to interact with attendees of the conference, but most specifically, it was really nice to interact with people that I've been interacting with on LinkedIn for quite a bit over the last few years. It was really wonderful. Had some wonderful, long, very in-depth, very heartfelt conversations with some people. And I just tell you that it's just the value of those interactions is just off the charts. So I'm just really, really happy to have spent that time with people. And I look forward to the next time that I'm able to do it. Took my wife with me, and we enjoyed being in Graz. I never got over my jet lag, unfortunately, this time around, but it was still nice to be there. The hospitality by the World Usability Congress was fantastic. The hospitality by the people at the hotel was great. We made friends with people at a restaurant we kept going to, a local establishment, and it was just wonderful. The whole thing was just wonderful. So I just loved it. But as we return to our broadcasting on the podcast now, there is a topic that I want to cover today that is near and dear to my heart. It's something I talk about a lot. I find it a little awkward in retrospect that I didn't spend really any time talking about this. It was in my presentation, but it just wasn't a predominant aspect, or a prominent, I should say, aspect of my talk. And it should have been. If anything, it was an oversight on my part that it didn't get more coverage than it did, although it was present. I did a word cloud at the end, and the topic that I'm going to cover today was there. But I just want to spend a few minutes talking about something and putting something on people's radar so that people can respect this more, so people can understand its worth to us as user experience professionals more, so that people can understand that when people speak against what I'm about to highlight today, they're really identifying who they are and where they stand with regard to this as a whole. And there's a lot of thought being shared about today's topic. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's either being misrepresented or it's being violated without mention of the topic by name, but being violated and being disrespected, which lets you know that people aren't committed to it and don't understand how it's really something that we should be embracing for our well-being, for our good. The topic for today's episode is Long Live the Gatekeeper. Long live the gatekeeper. The concept of gatekeeping comes up quite a bit in UX circles. And usually when gatekeeping is mentioned, it's mentioned and I don't usually like to use the word negative. I don't like the word positive either. In my world, it's either constructive or destructive. And when you look at things from a constructive and a destructive perspective instead of positive and negative, the subjectivity goes out the window, and you look at things more from an academic or a critical thinking perspective, which benefits everybody a lot more. Positive and negative are subjective. Positive and negative don't really shed the critical thinking light that it should. Hence, I don't like positive and negative. It doesn't really serve anybody that well. But usually when you hear the term gatekeeper, It's talking about somebody that is operating in a position of authority and keeping people out. Matter of fact, it's usually very one track minded, if you will. Gatekeeping is a concept that's usually presented by people to present this idea of a boogeyman, as we like to say, in UX circles that's trying to keep people out, trying to keep entry level people from getting jobs, most specifically. Folks, that concept couldn't be further from the truth. It's funny that people would mention gatekeeping, only present it in, again, negative light, but never really tell you what it truly is. And that is an act of manipulation. Let's call that out. We do everybody a favor. We do the discipline of service by calling out how that word is misused. And I've talked about this in a previous episode, how that it was a person that used to work for the CIA in the States, and he did a presentation once that I had the honor of hearing. It was on a recording, but I still had the honor of hearing it, where this person talked about how that when somebody takes a term and they misdefine it and in the process redefine it, that is an act of intellectual espionage and it's an act of mind control. When somebody takes the term gatekeeping, it doesn't tell you what it really is and then casts negative light. They're trying to get everybody, they're trying to mobilize people against the concept without ever telling them what they're really addressing. So consequently, the people who speak evil of gatekeeping as if it's this terrible thing that everybody should hate, this terrible thing that everybody should turn their backs on, that this terrible thing that anytime you see a person doing it, that we should beware of that individual, that they're doing everybody a gross disservice by gatekeeping. That couldn't be further from the truth. And we're going to talk about this totally from the hip. A lot of times I'll have an outline so I can keep my thoughts together. I'm going straight from the hip today to talk about this. There's one thing I want to relate to or refer to, I should say, because I actually did a social media post recently where I talked about gatekeeping, and I'm going to refer back to that just a little bit. But today's episode is really, again, just a spark thought. It's trying to send people in the proper direction with regard to this topic, because people who are fighting against gatekeeping are creating problems for the discipline. Now, that said, okay, if I say that gatekeeping is actually good, and that's my point, it is. Do you realize what gatekeeping really is today? Gatekeeping, which is presented as a mode of keeping people out, it's presented as a state of mind or an activity or set of activities that is used to basically provide a sense of restrictions that is unjustified, unneeded, and it is something that is not really, it's not ethical, is the picture that people paint. And that's not true. You know what gatekeeping really is? And I've talked about this a little bit before. We're just going to dedicate this entire episode to it. Gatekeeping provides the following benefits. And right now, I'm going to refer back to my recent social media post. I said, in this social media post, I said, gatekeeping is good. Other disciplines thrived after they accepted and embraced it. Here's why. 5 benefits of gatekeeping today, folks. 5 benefits. It establishes a reliable and a universal North Star for everybody in a given discipline or associated with whatever that gatekeeping is about. Number 1, without that North Star, there's going to be multiple North Stars, and some of those North Stars may or may not be things that people should be setting their sight on. That's what a North Star is. For those of you who've never heard the concept of a North Star before, that's the thing that's used to guide everybody to where they should be going. It's a means of wayfinding, especially for the people that don't understand the discipline a great deal. So the North Star is critical. Gatekeeping provides accountability. It serves as a mode of examination. It helps people to see, okay, am I doing well? Well, how do I know I'm doing well? Well, you have all of these concepts that you can measure yourself by or against to make sure that you're doing the right things. So this is critical. So that's another reason why gatekeeping is good. Number three, another point why gatekeeping is good. It helps ensure and provides guidelines for competence for people within a given discipline. Case in point, there was a day and time, and I had an episode where I talked about this to a degree. There was a time when businesses were being established, this is late 1800s or so in the United States, and everybody knew that they needed a person to handle their books. They knew they needed an accountant. And a lot of people were saying they were accountants and they were getting the jobs of the accountants, but they really weren't qualified. And consequently, the malpractice associated with that discipline was very high. So you had a lot of people who were selling themselves on being in these positions, being able to do this work, and they couldn't. Consequently, they ended up hurting the businesses they were doing the work for. Out of this, long story short, out of that issue, the CPA arose. They came up with a way to standardize and qualify people to make sure that the people who were accountants were validated, that they had the proper licensing, the proper validation, vetting out, if you will. These people were officially authorized to function in this role because of the establishment of the CPA program. So, and in conjunction with that, educational programs for accounting knew that they knew what they had to produce. They had to make sure that if you go through our program for education to be an accountant, you will be able to do everything that you need to do in order to be qualified to pass the CPA exam. This critical act of gatekeeping helped to precede the success and the stability of the accounting discipline. Without the CPA process, without people who respected that process, without people who saw it, recognized what they needed to do, and complied, accounting would not be in the successful state that it's in today. This is something that UX is lacking right now. When anybody does anything that's remotely gatekeeping related, of a truth, not trying to keep somebody out, but gatekeeping is all about quality advocacy. And I'm sort of getting ahead of myself a little bit, but sort of kind of don't care. It's gatekeeping is about making sure that people are qualified. Gatekeeping is about people making sure that people do the right things as they proceed along in their journey. And we'll give you some more examples of gatekeeping in a bit. We're surrounded by gatekeeping, and it's important. And anytime somebody wants to reject gatekeeping, they're rejecting all the benefits of gatekeeping. Matter of fact, and again, I'm just going to be all over the place. I'm not going to go on a straight line today, and that's fine. It's when people reject gatekeeping, they are really letting you know how self-serving they are. They're letting you know how disrespectful they are. They're letting you know how they don't respect authority, which is critical to stability and peaceableness in any society. There has to be respect for order. Anytime people don't respect order, that means that they want anarchy. There's only one or the other. You can't have both. And when there's anarchy, there will be no order. There will be no stability. There will be no North Star. And a lot of people want that anarchy because they refuse to comply. So at any rate, call that a little digression, but let's get back to the list. And I'm going to give you an off the cuff list of places where you will find gatekeeping in our society. So again, repeating number 3, it helps ensure and provides competence guidelines for those within a given discipline. It lets people know what they need to do in order to excel in a genuine way in the discipline where they are engaged. Gatekeeping helps to unify practitioners. And I'll give you another example. We talked about the what CPA did for accounting. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with ISO, the International Standardization Organization. Interestingly, if my memory serves me correctly, ISO is not an acronym that means that. That's just who they are. And they call the things that are produced by ISO standards. And ISO standards have global impact. And people respect, they embrace, they embody, they demonstrate, they follow. And so every time there is an ISO standard, for example, and I use this example quite a bit, everybody's credit card, debit card, ATM card, even gift cards, a lot of times have the same exact dimensions. They have the same exact structure. Do you know where that comes from? It comes from ISO. What does that facilitate? What does that do for us? It enables there to be unity. So every time everybody produces something within that medium that serves a similar purpose, it has to follow the guidelines that have been established in association with ISO. And there's a ton of ISO specifications out there, things that everybody had to agree upon. Oh, and by the way, did you know that there are some UX related ISO standards? Yes, there are. There are some UX related ISO standards, and a lot of people today don't know them. Now, sadly, there's only a few. And those few ISO standards, and you can get an ISO certification and things of that nature. However, it simply doesn't have that broad acceptance, and it doesn't cover enough. There needs to be, when you think about CPA, it covers everything that an accountant needs to do. When you think about the legal field and people passing a bar exam, it helps to address everything that the person needs to be able to do in order to be a viable practitioner of law. When it comes to somebody becoming certified to be a doctor, you know that that gatekeeping is the difference between a real doctor and a witch doctor in many instances. Otherwise, you'd have a bunch of people who would, from an anarchical perspective, would be practicing medicine, and that would create problems for a lot of the patients. You wouldn't want to deal with a doctor that wasn't board certified. You wouldn't want to deal with a dentist that's not board certified. You wouldn't want to deal with somebody who's going to operate on you and they're not validated and proven to be competent enough to do that surgery. But interestingly, in UX, a lot of the same people that know that they respect gatekeeping in other disciplines don't want to respect it in this discipline. There's others too. And again, I'll talk about some of these as we go. But at any rate, do you realize that it's because of ISO that we're able to withdraw money with our at the teller, at the automated teller machine? Do you realize that we're able to do what we need to do? Even now, you can actually tap a card. Do you know that those standards were established that it allows us to use a credit or a debit card and tap on a terminal in order to conduct a transaction? That's because those standards, that North Star is clear. And so that North Star is clear, and that unifies everybody. A lot of people fight against unification in UX. They fight against fundamentals and the importance of fundamentals in UX. They talk about things like UX writing, which I've come against several times. I do not agree with that discipline at all. Just become content strategists and be done with it. It's amazing how people buried IA and they buried content strategy, and then they take UX writing, which is something that UX practitioners were supposed to be doing before anyway, and now I was doing it. And it was part of my UX practice. It didn't deserve it. It never deserved its own title. It was something that should have been embedded along with everything else. You're going to make sure labels are proper. You're going to make sure that the writing is appropriate. You're going to make sure that readability is optimized. We're already doing that. It doesn't need its own name. It doesn't need its own separate discipline. It's not. And there's never 40 hours of UX writing, as they would put it, in a week to keep anybody busy. I've said it before. I'm saying it again. These people should be content strategists. They should be generalists. But UX writing doesn't deserve to be its own thing. People do that because that's an easy way for them to get into the discipline. Again, people trying to establish a standard that benefits them and does not benefit the discipline at large. That lets you know that they're not in this for the discipline, and they don't care about the discipline. They don't care that everybody in the discipline is an ambassador of the discipline. They only care about getting in, getting a job, getting a check, and being able to number themselves amongst the UX professionals when they really actually stowed away. We need to do away with the UX stowaways today. Either you're going to be in the discipline for real, or you're not in the discipline at all. And if you're not in the discipline at all and you occupy space, you are a poser, a retrofit, or an upstart. Or the other two qualifiers that I've put in there, you're a thief or you're a sellout. So be a real practitioner today. So, and when we understand what it takes to do the work, then we'll represent it that way. We'll hold others accountable for making sure that they can do the work, even without licensing. Today, we can still hold people accountable for being competent, for being qualified. And I'll segue here, or not segue, but I'll sort of have another little sidebar. It's amazing how many visual designers that come into UX, they fabricate their way into the discipline. They're not qualified. They don't understand UX. They love the UI/UX or UX/UI moniker because it gives them a doorway. It gives them an entry point, but it's not associated with the North Star. We are not aesthetically, how can I say, endowed, very well endowed from an aesthetic perspective. That's never been a UXer's thing. And a lot of visual designers come in. They are excellent. And I know a lot of great visual designers. But if you're not a UX professional, you're simply not a UX professional. Fabricating one's position in this discipline does not make a person a UX professional. And it's amazing how many people who are visual designers come into UX and then try to make actual practitioners look bad so that they can replace us. It is amazing the volume at which things like this happen. And a lot of people who haven't experienced it, they don't get it. And they scratch their head and they wonder. And it's like a kid questioning what an adult has to say about life. Truth be told, and somebody may say, well, Darren, that sounds cruel. No, welcome to the real world. It's what's happening. We're not going to dumb anything down just to make somebody feel better. This is the reality today. A lot of visual designers are violent. They're taking positions by force, so to speak. They're forcing their way into positions that they really didn't earn, really didn't achieve, aren't qualified to do. And you're not qualified to do UX work just because you read a few articles. That means that you're a general knowledge person. You don't have any domain knowledge. And fighting against people who have domain knowledge does a disservice to the discipline. A lot of that going on today. But enough for that digression today. Point 5 in the social media post, I said that gatekeeping is good because it offsets the onslaught. I already talked about this a little bit, and the threats of anarchy. Because people who are anarchists, they shoot down standards. I told the story before about how somebody heard a talk I delivered about heuristics, and they absolutely loved the talk. The talk resonated with them, and they went back and they told their team. And I'm going to say a part I didn't share before. Not only did the team reject this person trying to introduce them to heuristics, not because they thought it was wrong. They didn't want to learn how to do anything. They enjoyed their check. They didn't have confidence. And so they fought against what the person was recommending and trying to introduce them to heuristics. But do you know that these people at this company actually fought against me being hired at that company? Because it's not the first time this has happened to me. They didn't want to be accountable to what was being presented, and they knew that I was the source. So they fought against me as a source. Oh, man, that guy who did the talk? Oh no, we don't want to hire him. But we'll keep hiring visual designers who don't know what they're doing because we can control them. They won't push back. We can mold them into our own image. Never mind how that's going to have a long-term effect upon the discipline or short-term effect upon the discipline, but keep these real people out of here. I'm not the only person that's being fought against. I know somebody who works in, I won't even say what field they work in or what aspect of UX they're working in, but this person tried to get people to understand things from a pure UX perspective, only to be fought against to the extent that they no longer include that person in the projects. They keep that person at arm's length because they don't want to be accountable. Folks, this is not just me. This is happening across the discipline. They don't want to be accountable to the excellence that person is presenting. They'd rather just get a bunch of visual designers in there. Visual designers love to spitball because that's what happens in the visual design work. Nobody can speak from a heuristic perspective because they don't know heuristics. Nobody can speak from a standards perspective because they don't know standards. All they know is design libraries. All they know is they've seen this 5 different ways. Google does it like this, and this company does it like that, and Apple does it like this. Let's try one of those. And that's what they do. There is no expertise from that perspective. Gatekeeping would elevate domain knowledge to becoming a North Star. Gatekeeping would help people to be accountable and help people respect what they're being accountable to instead of fighting against it the way that they do today. This doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's not in our best interest. It's not helping us. For those of us that are going out there getting degrees, you're paying top dollar to become your best you only to be rejected for having worked to become your best you. Does that make any sense? And the people who are going through full educational experiences, such as the Google program, people keep saying that's a great start. No, it's not a great start. Somebody actually told me on LinkedIn last week that Google is approved by certain educational authorities. Well, then they invalidated their authority, because since when does getting peer feedback, only peer feedback, there's a place for peer feedback, but they only get peer feedback in the Google program. Since when does that validate or prove or allow somebody to check a box saying that an educational resource is valid? It actually invalidates it. Feedback must come from an authentic and authorized, a knowledgeable and a proven source. I mean, would you trust feedback from a 5-year-old about where you're going with your finances? Would you trust feedback, a smile from a 3-year-old to let you know that you're doing the right thing on decisions you're making in your life? Because that's what's going on here. The equivalent thereof. Gatekeeping is good. It's good. That urban definition that it's keeping people out, that's the one people are banking on. That's the one people are using. That's the definition people are embracing. That's wrong. Gatekeeping is all the things I just mentioned. It establishes a reliable and universal North Star. It promotes accountability. It helps ensure and provides guidelines for competency for people within a given discipline. It helps unify practitioners, and it offsets the onslaught and the threats that come along with anarchy. Folks, people who fight against and demonize gatekeeping are broadcasting their ignorance, and they're telling everyone what side they're really on. In closing, I promise some examples of gatekeeping today, just to let you know how we are surrounded by gatekeeping today. Traffic lights. A traffic light is a form of gatekeeping. Electrical standards, to make sure, not to mention the fact that electricians are subjected to gatekeeping from a standpoint of making sure they're qualified, because you can get a person that's not authorized to do electrical work for you, and good luck. I hope it goes well. I hope it works well. I hope they don't burn your house down. If they're not licensed, if they're not validated, the risk is there. The risk is there with anybody in general, but it's there more so with the people that are not authorized, are not validated, are not licensed to do that. But even within electricity, there are certain guidelines that the electrician has to abide by that validates their work. My wife and I just got a brand new central air unit recently. After that unit was installed, the city where I live sent somebody out to come and examine that work, gatekeeping, to make sure that it had to be a certain distance away from the house. It had to be done a certain way. It had to generate a certain amount of voltage. There was a whole bunch of little check boxes that had to be evaluated to make sure that the work that was done was what's called up to code. Building code, electrical code, acts of gatekeeping. Even speaking of code, in the developer or the engineer arena where people are programming things, there's code that has to be audited to make sure that that code is appropriate. That is an act of gatekeeping. I mentioned traffic lights. Speed limits are a type of gatekeeping. Traffic signs completely is an act of gatekeeping. The way that you board an aircraft, the people who fly the planes have to be approved in order to fly the planes. Folks, we are surrounded. Plumbers, hairdressers, nail technicians. Gatekeeping is everywhere. And everywhere you see gatekeeping, those disciplines are stable. Those disciplines ensure safety. Those disciplines make sure that the right people are authorized and approved to do the associated work. If you get somebody who's not, you're taking a huge risk because those people they're not prepared. Unlicensed, invalidated or unvalidated people, both, because there's invalidated is one thing and unvalidated is another. But if you bring somebody to do the work and they have not been validated, you are accepting a huge amount of risk and you could suffer some extreme consequences. And in some cases, depending upon the type of work associated with it, you could be penalized by law. So, and the law, not the legal system, just the laws that we have wherever you live are acts of gatekeeping. Folks, long live the gatekeeper. Can you say it with me? I said that in the social media post. I'm saying it again here now. Long live the gatekeeper, because gatekeeping is key. And unfortunately, we lack it today in UX. And anytime some people try to do something that is gatekeeping oriented, anytime somebody disrespects or is ignorant about gatekeeping, they come against the acts of gatekeeping, which sends us down a slippery slope. And we're already on a downward spiral as it is. As I said in Austria last week, UX is on life support. And one of the reasons UX is on life support is because we have failed to embrace and respect gatekeeping or acts of gatekeeping. UX remains alive today because of the little bit of respect for gatekeeping that exists. The hope that we have is based upon gatekeeping and the way that we exercise our respect, our care, our focus today on gatekeeping, because any hope, and what I talked about last week in Austria was how to triage UX, how to get it back on track to be restored into its initial glory and respect and value prop. It actually resides in gatekeeping. If we can restore, if we can get people to embrace it, gatekeeping, we're going to be in a good state. That is one of the main, I can't believe I didn't highlight that as a predominant element associated with how to get UX back to its formal and rightful place. I mean, a lot of people are trying to get out of UX right now because they feel that there's no hope. You feel that there's no hope. If we can get people to start embracing gatekeeping, we can restore hope. We can restore our rightful value proposition. We can start bringing the value that we should bring to our teams, to our businesses, to our own individual value perception. All these things lie in gatekeeping, folks. They lie in gatekeeping. When I did my talk about the 4 pillars of UX, and I talk about heuristics and usability, information architecture, UX research, and interaction and interface design, those are the 4 pillars as I cite them. Folks, that's a critical foundational aspect of UX that, because we don't embrace those, I mean, people fight against fundamentals now. Not only did people fight against heuristics at that one company, I've seen people fight against information architecture. I've seen people misdefine information architecture. I've seen people think that it's not relevant. I've seen people try to redefine it. Even though there's a lot of authorized sources that have produced fantastic works about it, people will still, and I mean, if we understood the fundamentals the way we should, we never would have fallen for the okie doke on design thinking. We never would have fallen for people trying to say that UX writing is a thing. And there's a host of other things that are going on in UX. We never allow people to create their own job titles. People who run UX teams that are unauthorized and should never have been given those jobs. Yeah, I said it. Never should have been given those jobs. Those are the ones who allow this kind of stuff to happen. You know why? They don't have a horse in the race. As long as they can keep getting that check for now, they're fine. And they're really vagabonds. So if they lose their job, they just run out and create something else or do something else. Or they'll say, hey, I had this leadership job over here for 5 years, so you should hire me to be a leader in your companies too. But only somebody who really understands what's going on and understands the discipline will see, actually, you never should have been hired to run that UX team over there. So no, we're not going to bring you over here. That's too many cowards in UX today. So it's not going to happen. So just interesting things today. Folks, long live the gatekeeper. If we're going to survive, if we're going to thrive, if we're going to be restored unto our former and rightful glory, we need to embrace gatekeeping. And when we do, when we understand we're surrounded by it, I mean, take away gatekeeping and somebody T-bones you at a traffic light. Take away gatekeeping and you try to go over a track and get hit by a train. Take away gatekeeping and you have absolutely no idea when and where to go to get on your plane to fly somewhere. You know, when and where, how to board a bus. You don't, there's a whole host of things. And I'll close off today with this. And I saw something recently because I didn't mention this example. Maybe this is a good closing point. But gatekeeping is in academia as well. And it should be. Academia it's an institution, but it is an institution of gatekeeping. And it governs gatekeeping to a great extent. And it helps and extends its gatekeeping, the benefits of its gatekeeping, to a plethora of disciplines. And a lot of institutions of higher learning work with the corporate world to understand what we need to produce in our learners so that they get candidates that can fill roles at their organization. That's been the long-standing partnership between corporate America, the corporate world, not just corporate America, but the corporate world at large, and academia. Otherwise, if that wasn't occurring, then academia, which unfortunately is happening right now because everybody in academia doesn't understand that, they're not doing that. They just enroll people so they can make money and they don't tie into the corporate partnership. And so that's another reason why learning experiences, a lot of them are going south. But what I want to speak to is this. In order to be a teacher, in order to be an educator in higher learning, there is some gatekeeping in place. You have to, if you're going to be an adjunct, you have to have a certain degree. You have to have already achieved a certain degree. And I'm more familiar with teaching at the graduate level, not at the undergraduate level. I'm more tuned with teaching at the graduate level. And so I can only speak to that part of it. I don't know a lot about teaching in undergrad. So I'll just address the one that I am familiar with. And when you teach in higher learning, so this is graduate level, people that are going after master's degrees, when you teach at the graduate level, you have to at least have a master's degree. If you don't have a master's degree, you are not allowed at pretty much any institution. You are not allowed to teach. That's just point blank. This is an act of gatekeeping that helps ensure the quality of instruction. It helps ensure the quality of those who would be doing the teaching. It is a critical requirement that has helped to ensure, is targeted at ensuring the quality of the learning experiences. Because the level of critical thinking that people with a master's degree individual has, a holder, I should say, is different than somebody who has no degree at all. I know some people will question that, hear me out, or it's something that's just, there's a big difference. Let's just leave it at that. There's a huge difference between the person who has been subjected to and submitted to the rigors of a master's degree program and a person that has not. The same can be said for somebody who has gone through the steps to operate at a PhD level, who has a doctorate degree, has been subjected to more rigors than someone who has a master's degree or less. So this is something that has been put in place to keep people at bay. Really. Now, is this keeping people out? In a sense, but not as you suppose. Again, it's targeted at helping optimize the quality. Because if you remove that gate, if you remove that requirement, then academia will be barnstormed with a bunch of unqualified folks who lack not only the rigors, but respect for the rigors. And I've heard people before, so I shouldn't just say somebody, but I've heard people before saying, man, I would like to teach, but I don't have a master's degree. So, well, then go get one. Now, here's where some very important critical thinking comes into play. The standards of gatekeeping, I mean, just take a step back. Do you respect standards? Do you respect and understand the benefits of gatekeeping? Do you understand what would happen if gatekeeping, where it has been established, especially when it has been in place for a long time, if that's changed, what happens to the institution or the discipline associated with where it has been established, where it has been maintained, and where it has been proven to work? If that comes down, everything associated with where that mode of gatekeeping has been erected will also come down. All the benefits will be destroyed, will be lost. And it's interesting how people will complain, well, I should be able to teach because I have a lot of experience. I have a lot to offer. Well, again, do you know what's required? Do you know that that's required? When I first learned, I wanted to teach. I love education. I've been doing training longer than I've been doing UX work, actually. And I eventually got 5 instructional design certifications, and I'm a doctoral candidate in the same field. I understand education. I love education. I respect education. I understand it's an institution. I know everything. I understand everything about education, how it plays into society as a whole. I respect it. When I said I would like to teach, and I had only done corporate training in the past, when I found out that I needed a master's degree in order to be approved to teach at an institution of higher learning, I didn't sit there and complain. I want to teach. Let me have my way. I didn't do that. I went and I respected the criteria. And I went out and I got a master's degree, not to learn how to do UX. That's not why I got a UX-related master's degree. I got a master's degree in something that I cared about because I know that that's part of how you energize the pursuit of the degree. And make sure you go after something you love doing. Otherwise, it's going to seem more like work, and you're not going to have a really rewarding journey. If you don't like zoology, don't get a degree in zoology. That's going to be really, really difficult. And you don't have the acumen or the aptitude to pursue that, then it makes it that much more difficult. You have to go after something you love, and then you ride the coattails of that energy because of your interest. That's what helps you accomplish that. A little tidbit for somebody there. You're trying to figure out what to do. Chase your passion. It will energize you. But I found out what I needed to do, and I did it. I hear people saying, well, I want to teach, and they should change their standards. So they should stop everything they've done. They should change all their standards. They should remove all their gatekeeping because of what you want. I mean, some people don't listen to themselves at all. Everybody should change what they're doing because of what you want. Everybody should change all of their standards because it supports you. Even though we know in UX that a sample set of 1 means absolutely nothing. Somebody will yet submit. They will submit a mindset, a request based on a sample set of 1. We talk about how that folks shouldn't be order takers and then want somebody to become an order taker because of how it benefits us as an individual? Absolutely not. Gatekeeping is in place for a reason. And it's funny when I hear people saying, well, I want to teach and I shouldn't have to get a master's degree. No, that's what you need to do. So now I question when I see that, do you really respect education? Do you really respect the institution? Because if you're trying to change it, if your proposal is that we change the standards associated with this because it's what you want, because it paves the way for you, when people do that, they're no different than the people who are trying to get people to lay all the standards and the fundamentals of UX aside to let them into the discipline, to allow somebody to come in without their being qualified. That is an absolutely asinine proposal. It's asinine. Long live the gatekeeper. Gatekeeping is in place for a reason. And every individual, when you encounter what the dictates of gatekeeping are, then just comply. Respect it, understand it, strive to understand what you don't understand, respect it, and comply. And now you're furthering the well-being of that discipline, which we don't have in UX today because people want to be all over the place and they don't respect anything. And I find it really interesting how people want to fight against the gatekeeping of academia, but at the same time don't respect academia. So what do you really want to be a part of? Why should we let you in if you don't respect anything? It doesn't make any sense. I complied, here I am. And making deals with other universities and looking at other opportunities as we speak. But I respect the institution. Do you respect the institution of UX today? Do you respect the discipline of UX today? If you do, you will respect gatekeeping, and you will start to take the words of those who fight against gatekeeping with a grain of salt, because if they're fighting against gatekeeping, that's telling you they don't understand it. And if they don't understand it, you have to ask yourself, what else do they not understand? Because everything we're accomplishing today, I am recording a podcast that's tied to God knows how many different bodies of disciplines and it is the gatekeeping in each respective discipline that's enabling me to put this podcast together. I would not be able to do it without them, without what they have done, and without the gatekeeping that has been established that allows everything, the computer I'm looking at, the microphone, the podcasting board, the computer I'm looking at, the monitor, everything. Gatekeeping is critical. Let's embrace it today, and we'll all be better off for it. Again, say it with me. Gatekeeping is good. Long live the gatekeeper, folks. So that's all the time we have for today. We're going to end it here. And then we got another guest session we're going to present next week. Wonderful guests that we've been fortunate enough and honored enough to have on the show. So we're going to present another guest interview, another talking shop session over the next couple of weeks. So until that time, it is time to sign off. So this is Darren Hood, the host of The World of UX, wishing everybody all the best. Make sure to tell your friends about the show. Make sure to rate the show. We're helping you out. Make sure to give us a rating. Help us to get the word out about the show. There's people even starting to steal some of this content and claim it as their own. Don't let them get away with that. Help other people to know about the world of UX with Darren Hood. How about that? Okay. But until next time, this is Darren Hood, the host of The World of UX, signing off. Happy UXing, everybody.